Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. Glad you could be with me. I have something quite interesting to talk about, and that is a report which came out today in relation to neglect of children here in Australia. Now, we at Child Protection Party have been advocating ever since the day we started that the issues that we have in relation to children and how they're treated in this country are not necessarily just those of children that are held by the Department of Child Protection or Child Protection Services around Australia. That the issue that sits with regard to children in particular is something which is widespread and which is an issue for all of us to be concerned about. I posted last week on the issue relating to why it is that people should support CPP. And the reasons I gave were that child protection, I'll reframe that. The issues with regard to the children are broad, not necessarily always related to child protection. We now have a report that validates the reason why the Child Protection Party is in existence in the first place. And that is a report which came out that says that the number of children that have been abused in this country through either some form of neglect, physical, emotional, psychological and sexual abuse is quite stark, and that at some point we need to do something about it. Now, we have suggested for a long, long time that one of the things that we could do is start to think about the issues around children being managed federally. And that's certainly a proposition that has come forward today as a result of this report. I don't know why it is that we have to wait until some academic somewhere, someplace does some research that discovers what we already know. In this particular case, we know that children in our community are neglected at varying levels without necessarily having come in contact with the Department of Child Protection. So today on the ABC, there was a report on this very issue, and I thought I'd play that to you along with just highlighting some of the statistics that have come out of this as well. So here's the report from the ABC.
Provided to a groundbreaking study on child maltreatment released today. It shows people who experience harm as kids are much more likely to have poorer health outcomes later in life. Researchers say policymakers need to act now on the findings, and a warning this story contains distressing information.
It's only now in his 50s that Craig has been able to stop and appreciate the small things. The fine arts student has been transformed in part by his trusted service dog Ruby.
I've taught her to smell my fear and distress, so she can actually advise me or nudge me with her nose before I'm even feeling it.
The father of 4 has post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, but Ruby helps keep his attacks at bay with those little nudges, enough to help him reset his thoughts.
That's had a massive effect on centering me and allowing me to be rather calm and centred throughout the day.
Craig was sexually and emotionally abused as a child. He went on to experience intermittent periods of homelessness and often lived dangerously, leaving him with physical injuries. He's also struggled to forge and maintain friendships or ongoing employment, and before Ruby, he drank heavily.
We were hoping that if you did it long enough and hard enough that the pain would leave you permanently by unfortunately dying.
Authors of the Australian Child Maltreatment Study want to prevent more stories like Craig's. Researchers surveyed 8,503 people aged over 16, finding 62% said they'd experienced at least one form of maltreatment in childhood, including 39% witnessing domestic violence, 32% being physically abused, 30% reporting emotional abuse, 28% experiencing sexual abuse, and 8.9% who said they'd experienced neglect.
When we saw those findings come up in our internal meeting after the data collection, the air went out of the room.
It's shown that child maltreatment is very strongly associated with adverse mental health outcomes.
Ben Matthews is the report's lead author. He says people maltreated as kids are almost 3 to 5 times more likely to have a mental health disorder, 4 times more likely to have attempted suicide in the past year, and 6 times more likely to be dependent on cannabis. He thinks the findings prove the need for radical change to prevent harm.
Look, the key finding, unfortunately, is that child maltreatment in Australia is widespread, it's harmful, and it really needs a national, coordinated, sustained response.
The National Children's Commissioner has reviewed the study and is aghast.
I think we are failing children in this country.
She wants to see the creation of a Federal Minister for Children or a national task force.
If these shocking findings do not trigger urgent action by government to make child wellbeing a national policy priority, then what will?
The federal government has been briefed of the findings, with the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, describing them as shocking. He says the data will be used to develop better policies. But with the budget fast approaching, advocates and those with lived experience say they want to see action now.
Early intervention, I think Ben, he's on the money with that.
The well-being of our future generations depends on it. Penny Timms, ABC News.
And there is no more important statement than that, I think, that our children depend upon us to do better for them. And the issues that came out of that are important to us as a political party is that there need to be a body, a minister for families or a minister for children's well-being. So there needs to be something at federal level that means that all children are cared for, and that primarily there are policies in place that ensures that children who are neglected in one form or another, or where there is domestic violence or whatever, don't necessarily fall under the purview of the Department of Child Protection, but whereby certain preventative methods are used in order to ensure that those children are safe, and whatever are the prevailing issues, that somehow those particular issues are met. Now I'm going to take us to the key findings from that, which I think are extremely important. I better bring those up. So the findings are that child maltreatment is widespread. Girls experience particularly high rates of sexual abuse and emotional abuse. None of that should be a surprise to us. Child maltreatment is a major problem affecting today's Australian children and youth. Is not just something that happened in the past, and I think that's really important to identify. It's happening now as we speak. Child maltreatment is associated with severe mental health problems and behavioural harms, both in childhood and adulthood. Child maltreatment is associated with severe health risk behaviours, both in childhood and adulthood. Emotional abuse is particularly harmful and is much more damaging than society has understood. And so I think it's time, it was time probably a long time ago, whereby we started to address these very important issues. We at the Child Protection Party have been advocating for this for years. And finally, a report has been released which highlights our greatest fear, and that is a large percentage, up to 62% of our population, have experienced some form of childhood maltreatment, and something needs to be done about it. So if you wish to contact the Child Protection Party, please do. You can do so at admin@childprotection.party. And could I ask you please to subscribe to our channel, and also to have a look at the latest video that we've put out in relation to an interview that I did with parents recently, and have a look at that. It's on our YouTube channel. It's doing very well in terms of the number of people that have viewed it so far, and we're hoping that more people will do so and respond to it accordingly. So thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, and more importantly, look after yourselves.